r/ask Reddit. Serious, Redditors who were almost murdered. What's your story? I was a clerk at an appliance repair shop. Some guy had brought his riding lawnmower in to be worked on, but decided it cost too much to have repaired, so my boss asked me to load it up in our lift truck and drive it to his address. I was 17 and had my relatively newly minted license on me, so it felt like a big responsibility and I was happy to do it. I loaded it up just fine and drove to his address. When I started to unload it, I noticed that the battery was unattached. One of the technicians must have removed it to work on it or something. Unfortunately, I had no tools to put it back in. I checked the work order and it said customer declined repair, needs replacement engine. So I thought he won't care because the engine is dead anyway. I rang the doorbell, and this fat drunk guy with no shirt opens the door suddenly. I had lowered the riding mower off the lift truck and had pushed it into his yard. He yells, "What the hell are you leaving that pile of junk in my yard for?" I said, "Is this not your riding lawnmower?" He says, "Hell yes, it's mine. But it's in pieces and I don't want the damned thing. What the F is wrong with you people?" So I apologize and ask him if he wanted me to load it back up. I didn't know what else to say. For some unknown reason this pissed him off even more, and he disappeared back in his house. I go back to the truck to radio my boss. This was back in the days before cell phones, to see what she wanted me to do. In the meantime, that drunk bastard stomps out onto his porch with a shotgun, leveled it at the truck, and pulled the trigger. The windshield shattered, and I literally couldn't hear anything but ringing from the noise. I jumped in the truck, started it up, put it in reverse and floored it out of his driveway, almost going into the ditch on the other side of the road. He fires again, this time hitting the passenger side of the truck near the door, blowing shrapnel into the cab of the truck, which hit my leg and cut me a bit. I flew back to work faster than I had ever driven before, called my mom and dad, and told my boss I was never coming back to work there again. The cops came and took my statement, arrested the dumbass, and I had to testify against him a few months later, despite desperately never wanting to see him again. He only spent about 6 months in prison for it. Luckily by the time things were settled I had moved away to college, and didn't have to worry about him anymore. Edit. I'm very surprised by how much my story took off. Someone suggested an apt TLDR. Too long didn't read. Drunk guy tried to kill me cause I dumped his lawnmower in his property. I will never understand why firing a gun at someone with lethal intent would put someone in prison for only 6 months. That is insane. I was 13 years old. My friend and I were out skateboarding and for some reason this one woman got really angry that we skated on the sidewalk in front of her house. She began screaming incoherently and we just laughed it off and kept going. My friend went one way and I went another. A minute later, I am still just riding on the sidewalk to get back to my house when all of a sudden the woman yelling from before pulls up beside me in her car and starts screaming again. Full disclosure, I replied with some expletives and told her to get away. I continued riding and she just drove slowly beside me while continuing to scream. The woman eventually drove off, but then she did a U-turn and came back towards me. I expected her to just pass by and go home, but then I noticed she was actually driving directly at me. I froze and just watched her car come at me. Eventually my brain decided I had to move. It was literally like a movie and I dove away just as the car drove over where I was standing. I don't know her exact speed, but if I had to guess it was 30-40 miles per hour. She just continued driving and I sprinted home. She was later arrested and plead guilty to assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill. Damn, that lady is crazy. I posted this story before on another thread once, but here goes. When I was in high school, a random new kid started stalking me, like following me home from school. I'd see him outside my house. He'd stand by my locker at school. He was weird. Told my counselor, but they didn't really believe me. Told a teacher I was close with and he talked to the principal. They said they'd watch out. After about a week my boyfriend was pissed the school wasn't helping me. He confronted this kid and they almost physically fought. Finally, he got kicked out of school and about a month later, less than 3 miles from my house, he strangled a girl my age, who also went to my school, and dumped her body in a field. This makes me so mad. Why was no one helping you? Why did no one help that other girl? You'd be surprised at how little schools do anything in these kind of situations. For example, for all the anti-bullying promotions they do, they never take any bullying cases seriously and actually punish the victim if the victim ever fights back. My ex and I got into an argument because he had become abusive and I told him I was going to tell his family what he'd been doing. He got so angry at that he tried to grab me, but I ran out of the room. He headed for the gun closet, so went outside to make sure when he killed me, the neighbors would see it. I called 911 outside and for some lucky reason they were just blocks away. When they got there he was in the middle of loading the Remy 700. I pressed charges and he only got 1 night in jail. His dad bailed him out, and despite me getting a 5-year restraining order, I'd run into him around town. He pleaded no contest and got 3 years probation. That's it. I moved 3,000 miles away, but I still fear him. Your instincts in this situation are wildly impressive. I am so glad you got out safe and are so far away. I was a freshman in college and, in my first semester, pledged a fraternity. One night, I was assigned to work the door at a party which was not uncommon. Around 1:32 AM, a group of guys that worked at the dining hall, I remembered the one because he made an amazing cheesesteak, showed up and each paid $5 per cup. A few minutes after they paid, the last keg kicked and none of them got any beer. As soon as they told me that the kegs just kicked, I started counting out cash to pay them back for the cups that they bought. Before I could get them their money back, one of my drunk pledge brothers decided to physically force them out the door while yelling shit talking them. As soon as I could calm my buddy down I went outside to give them their cash back, only to be met with a big surprise. When I made it down the back steps, cheesesteak guy aggressively steps forward and says y'all made a big ducking mistake. I'm strapped as a mother ducker, pulls a handgun out of his waistband and points it directly between my eyes. In that moment, it was remarkable that 18-year-old me didn't shit his pants immediately. A few of the older guys in the house stepped outside and were able to talk the guy down without incident. But it felt like I had that gun pointed between my eyes for an eternity. Long story short, I was incredibly lucky that I didn't get shot that night. Needless to say, I went without cheesesteaks for a few semesters after that night. I would have reported that dude to the university. That's exactly the kind of thing the school needs to know about. He's gonna end up murdering a student and the school is gonna have to pay out a lot of money in a settlement. I've told this before, but I witnessed a murder directly in front of me while I was sitting in my Jeep with the top down. 2 guys were arguing on the sidewalk. I was just sitting there. They knew I was there and didn't care. One guy pulled out a homemade shank from his pant leg and straight armed it into the other guy's eye. I will never forget the crunching sound when that blade went into his face. The murderer looked at me once and bolted. I ran up to help, but the guy was ducked. Blood spouting out of his eye and gushes, and he was moaning horribly. He died as the ambulance arrived. I was the only witness and nearly testified in court, but the guy pleaded guilty and got 25 years. Still have nightmares about that 25 years later. I saw a fatal car accident that ducked me up pretty good. I sought out something called EMDR, which blurred the images in my brain a little bit so they aren't as graphic. It only took 1 session with a qualified therapist and definitely helps me sleep better. Just something to consider. I was working at a gas station. It was at night and slow, so I was sitting in the office watching TV. All of a sudden, one guy comes in behind me, another guy comes in front of me. Guy in front says don't get up. I give him the wad of cash from my breast pocket, and then the money from my front pocket. They rush out back into the darkness. I stay put, just like the guy said. Then I call the owner. A car pulls up to get gas. I tell them they need to pay by credit card or exact change because I just got robbed. Then I reach up to touch my neck. It was bloody. The guy in back was holding a knife to my throat. Must have been a sharp knife not to feel it, or adrenaline. I was getting screamed at by my ex. As usual, I don't remember what I said but he grabbed my arm and pulled me off the couch. He started hitting me. Not the first time. I'd never seen him so angry, and I'd long since taught myself to not react and give him the feeling of having power over me. If I didn't cry he would get bored and stop eventually. Next thing I know he pushes me up against the wall and wraps his hand around my throat. I was having a hard time breathing, but I still wouldn't cry. Just as I was about to pass out, I gathered all my strength and punched him in the ribs as hard as I could. He dropped me, and before I could catch my breath, I hit him in the balls. When he was down, I kicked him in the ribs a couple times and locked myself in the bathroom until he came and started his usual apologies. I knew I needed to get out, and 2 weeks later, I did. It's been 8 years. I was going to share a similar story of an ex pinning me to the bed and choking me. Right as things started to get dark, I managed to latch onto something on the bedside table and bash it over his head. Sad to say, I still didn't leave for quite a while after that. But just a SAR. If your partner ever chokes you, your statistical chances of eventually being killed by them jump pretty significantly. I was staying at the Extended Stay America in Brooklyn Center, MN, in the summer of 2018. Had my dog outside to go potty, and as I was walking her back inside, a car pulls up and stops. Just before I can open the door, I hear, "Hey, nice dog." I turn around and see some dude step out and literally pull out a knife. I don't say a word. Tell my dog to jump. Grab her mid-jump. Run inside and slam the door shut, breaking the lock into the engage position in the process. The building was and still is incredibly worn down and barely held together with toothpick level materials. I wind sprint to my room and unlock the door with the card key. Just as I walk in, I look out the exterior window in the hallway and see the dude actually looking into the building to presumably see which room I'm staying in. I get into my room, lock the door behind me, call the front desk and simply say that the back door to the building's lock is busted. Oh, and that also some dude in the back area parking lot is walking around with a knife. I hear the clerk say again, "Alright, I'll call the police in." Too long, didn't read. Nearly got shanked because I was walking a Boston Terrier. The last time I saw my ex, I broke up with him while we sat in his car at a park. After choking me until I passed out, he got onto the freeway and drove 100+ miles per hour while slamming my head into the window and dashboard. I was able to get out of the car at one point when he got off the freeway and ran into the street screaming, trying to wave down a car, but no one stopped. He was forcing me into his trunk when a man pulled over and started filming him, and I ran onto a bus. I won't ever forget how his eyes looked and that he was absolutely silent the whole 2 hours. I moved across the country after his mom called me panicking to warn me he was looking for me. I was mugged once, and the part that upset me the most was me running up to a few people who saw the whole thing go down, asking for help, and they all looked at me like I was crazy and backed away, not saying anything. Was more annoyed at that than the guy stealing my phone. A mentally ill kid in my school stalked me for a week and made plans to kill me. He said it was cause I made fun of him. Turns out he thought I was someone else. So there's that. The teacher said the video footage was creepy. I'd be walking down the halls and he was behind me, just staring. His plan was to put a shank in my neck. A teacher caught him before he stabbed me, and I remember the kid left in police cuffs. Whoa, a school actually did something about something for once. Man, you are one lucky bastard. My ex-stepfather is bipolar. After my mom left him, he had another manic episode. He broke in and pulled a gun on us. Told me to go to my room and not to call the police. I was 11. I called the police. When they pulled up, he shot through the door to my bedroom and emptied the clip. I had already grabbed my cat and was outside under the deck. I am just glad he shot the door and not my mom. My 1/2 sister was born later that year. At her funeral, he showed up and kept trying to talk to me. He couldn't understand why I refused. He was never charged and has no memory of the incident. He spent a weekend at a mental hospital and then was released to go to work as a teacher. I don't understand how all this was ignored, and he was considered an upstanding teacher and person. I was about 18, female, and just moved to the city for university. Driving near downtown and I see police lights behind me. I pulled over and a man in plain clothes gets out of an unmarked car, and when he is close to my window I see another man getting out the passenger side, also in plain clothes, walking up to the other side of my car. I freaked and floored it out of there. I think I ran over their foot. Then I went the wrong way down several one-way streets and ended up driving an hour away in one direction cause I was afraid they would follow me. I called the police to make sure they hadn't actually pulled me over, which they hadn't. They never found the guys. So glad you were thinking so quickly to get out of there. When I was young, maybe 4 or 5 years old, My family lived in a small town of about 1,200 people. It was mostly a farming town. My dad was the manager of the only bank in town. A farmer missed some payments on a loan, so the bank foreclosed and took his farm. This farmer apparently blamed my father personally, so he went to the bank with a rifle and threatened my father. My father talked to him. Cops were called, and the farmer was arrested and arraigned. Bail was posted for the farmer, so he was released from jail. A few days later, my family was eating dinner and we heard a truck pull up and park in front of our house. It was a really quiet street in a small town, so my father went to the front window to see who pulled up. It was the farmer, and this time he had a shotgun. He walked right up to the front door and knocked, and my family busted us out of the back door and ran to a neighbor's house. Our front door was unlocked, so he could have opened it and blasted us all, but I guess he didn't think to check it. Cops were again called, and the farmer was arrested. My family spent the next week or so in a hotel a few towns away until it was assured that the farmer would be in jail without a possibility of bail. Came home, went into kitchen from garage, saw all my stereo equipment. This was 1982, stacked by front door. Burglar shot me twice in the back. He was practically next to me when I walked in but never saw him, then took off. Not much more to say. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.